picture of Mary and the little goose, and said to her husband, oh, you know, she obviously loves animals, you know, do let's meet her. So, you know, that was quite a good meet. So, the first meeting. Anyway, this dinner was arranged, and I couldn't believe, you know, I was meeting people who might give me money to do what I so wanted to do. And they arrived and was introduced to Graham, the chairman, and then his wife Gilly, and she was really friendly, and oh, thank you, Mary, for the portfolio. What a lovely picture of you and the little gosling, and how is he? And, I don't know how many of you have heard the story, but anyway, and I looked at her in horror because he'd grown up and we'd eaten him. This is the first question that a potential sponsor is asking me. And I thought, well, you know, do I tell her the truth and just ruin my chance of sponsorship, or do I lie to her? And I thought, no, you know, don't lie, I'm trying not to lie. And so I just looked at her and said, I'm afraid I've eaten him. She sort of looked at me in horror, and then burst out laughing. Really, and I think the fact I dared to tell the truth in that instant, they felt that I was a very trustworthy person. So anyway, dear Graham and Jill, Thomas, they were so supportive of me, and they turned my life around really from doing all the odd jobs, working hard to try and make ends meet. They initially took on Divers Rock for a year. Then so loved the sport that they then wanted to get involved in more. They said they'd buy me 2 young horses, and so that was great. And then anyway, it progressed. So for 3 years I suddenly built up and had a team of 8 horses and a nicer lorry, and could stop doing all these odd jobs. My mum did my butcher's round for a few more years, and she took over my jobs for me. And I could then really progress. And dear Gilly, Gilly, the wife, sadly their marriage split up a number of years later, but Gilly kept supporting me, and still to this day she's involved. So from 1985 to now 2012, she's still part of my team, which is quite amazing, really. So anyway, they sponsored me for 3 years, and sadly the company was sold for huge money to Cable and Wireless, bought out the Carphone Group. Graham and their marriage split up, and Graham moved out to Australia. So Gilly supported me initially, and then I had to find a sponsorship. But in those days it was quite different, because most of the top riders had single big sponsors. Whereas funny, it doesn't, these days there's no rider with a single big sponsor. But in those days you had, Lucinda Green had SR Direct Mail, Ginny Lang had Citibank, Mark Todd had Kimberly Clark. There were numbers, Edinburgh Will and Mill with Scotty, Ian Stark. So it was just the way it sort of worked. And I managed to clinch a sponsorship with Frizzell, an insurance company. They took on all the horses, and I had a great 3 years with them. And then another insurance company carried on from that. But then times changed, and now how I run my yard, as do most riders in England, we ride for owners. All the horses in my yard, they're all paying guests. I don't own any horses myself, except I'm breeding a few, so I've got a few young ones as I've bred. So rely on sort of generous owners to ride for owners who I can bill once a month, and then work with many different sponsors. And I'm quite crafty, because I try and sort of all the things that I need, I try and get sponsored by a company that does them. So things like my tack is Barnsby, polypads for saddle cloths, new equine wear, boots for the horses, Pfizer do the worming, I'm a Quest wormers, Bailey's Horse Feed do the feed, and Mark's Way Horsehage do the haylage, and so it goes on. I'm sort of, so that and then I don't have to buy anything, and work with bigger sponsors for me, and Jules, clothing sponsor. They're great. They do a great range of clothing, and actually that was all through Emily, my daughter. She started that sponsorship off because she is she's sort of about 10-year-old. She knew how I ran my yard and how reliant I was on sponsorship, and she was like, I'm going to get sponsored. And I caught her writing this letter at the kitchen table, and I said, who are you writing to? She had out her well-headed notepaper, and she said, I'm writing to Jules to see if they'll sponsor me. So I said, oh well, I suppose you could send them the letter, but don't hold out your hopes. She sent the letter to them, and it quite sort of tickled their fancy in a way. It was, I'm Mary King's daughter, and I want to be better than my mummy one day. And anyway, this sort of, you sponsor me. And so they wrote back and said they would do a clothing endorsement for her, and as long as she wore their clothing at all her Little Pony Club activities, they would supply her with a certain amount of clothing each year. So that was the sort of first connection with Jules. I was with Barber, the clothing company, and I then, as Barber finished, the sponsorship agreement finished, so I said to Emily, I'm going to approach Jules and see if they'll sponsor me as well. She was, don't you dare steal my sponsor money. And so I said, no, don't worry, I'll just see if they'll take me on as well. And of course they'd love to, because that's their, they have, it's a full range of clothing they have from children up to adults, so it suited them well. Anyway, so Jules and then HSBC are another major sponsor. William Foxpitt and myself are ambassadors for HSBC. But it's a lot of work. It's not just them giving me money. You have to do a lot of work in exchange, especially at this time of the year. Out of season, the last event is at the end of October in Europe, and the horses all go out on holiday then. Literally, some owners have their horses back to their own, if they've got facilities to winter the horses themselves, or some owners ask if I'll winter them for them. And they go out in the field, they're out day and night. I try not to rub them up initially because I like them to grow nice big thick hairy coats, and only when the weather gets really bad then I start to rub them a little bit. And they have if their feet are good enough, they have their shoes off, and some horses with not such good front feet maybe have to keep their front shoes on. And they literally just are out, and they don't have any feed, they just have grass until the weather gets very cold, and then I do let them have a bit of food. And they go out together in groups, and I think it's a really important time for them to sort of chill out and just be real horses again. So they have 2 or 3 months out without being ridden, and then they come back in January, and they're all quite keen and happy to be back in and being all pampered again. And for me as well, I'm sure that's why I've kept going for so long, is that I don't ride through all through November and December. Have a complete break, and the girls who work for me, they go and do other things. And so we sort of, the yard, at the moment my yard's empty, I've got no horses in it, the horses are out in the fields, and literally just checking the horses each day. But then we all start again in January, and I think, then I'm all excited to another year ahead, and the girls come back to work and they're all sort of fresh and keen to get going for another year, and I'm sure that's sort of helped me to keep going, rather than carrying on working away through November and December riding. So, anyway, now, obviously this year's been amazing with the Olympics. Feel very proud that our country put on such a fantastic Olympic Games. I did wonder when it's sort of 6 years, isn't it, previous to an Olympics, that they choose where the Olympics is, who's going to win the bid in 6 years' time for the Olympics. And when I heard it was that London had won the bid, part of me was thrilled to bits that during my lifetime, there was going to be a home Olympics, and I had a chance of riding there. But part of me thought, oh, it's not going to be half as good as, you know, the Sydney Olympics or the Beijing Olympics where you fly the horses, you know, to the other side.